Hi, everyone. Welcome to our work session. Just checking to see who's online with us. Please tell us if you're here or not. Any of you. Jeremy.
Hey, Jeremy.
And Jeremy, any others?
Nobody else owned up to it.
A bunch of pretty faces, but not anything behind them. I see up there. Thanks, Jeremy. I think Jennifer's going to join us shortly, and we're just going to jump into our work session now. We're here at the district office, where both our superintendent, our business administrator, Susan, Joyce, Nancy, myself, Doug is out of town, and I believe Jennifer will be joining us shortly. So, with that, let's quickly jump in and talk about the things that are found in tonight's board meeting. I'm not gonna, I think those hopefully who know they're gonna be giving our moment of reverence and pledge of allegiance will be here. Superintendent celebration, you got some things that will be some time with regards to that. Let's just quickly look at items in the consent calendar. If anybody had any questions of items that are found under 5, I'm going to say 5D, the temporary waiver to purchase procedure for expenditures tied in with COVID-19.
I can address that,
Please.
Board President, if you like. A little more context. As we move into reopening schools this fall and a need to be nimble in the purchase and acquisition of products related to COVID-19. And we currently, as you're aware, have a $30,000 threshold in district procurement procedures. It's not in board policy, but it is district procedure. What we're hoping to be able to do is allow some latitude for me to make decisions. For an example, if time is of the essence and we need to order 30,000 masks, we would like to be able to make that purchase knowing that it may exceed, the $30,000 threshold for board approval, knowing that we don't have a board meeting in July, and then the next soonest would be August, and then it might be too late. And there might be instances like that through this next fiscal year that would require a timely purchase. I am in that space, not looking, it's not an authority grab, it's just how do we be responsive and nimble in light of the changing, and as we experienced in March, April, May, the rapidly changing experience in operating schools under COVID-19. I would provide a monthly report to the board on any of those expenditures that exceeded that amount for your situational awareness. And I would also provide some information to you before making the purchase for your situational awareness. In the synopsis that you see, if there were anything that the board would disagree, you as a board reserve the right to rescind that authority before such time. It would just be brought to my attention and brought to the next board meeting and put on hold. But it really is it's not a waiver from procurement authority in terms of what's in procurement code. It's really just a waiver from that $30,000 threshold that's found in district procedures. Anyway, questions or comments or thoughts?
Just a quick question. Does this mean you cannot spend this until July 1, even if you encountered some great deals on PPE or something?
As it's currently written, it would be for the fiscal year. Now the CARES funding specifically can be reimbursed back, to March 15th.
Okay.
In terms of any expenditures that we've done previous. But as the waiver is currently written, I would, in the next 2 weeks, I would have to wait 2 weeks, right, before actually making a purchase.
Okay.
Given the language of that waiver, unless there was a motion to change that language to be effective immediately. For that, I don't know what the level of comfort is with the board in general anyway, but just thought I'd put it out there so we can make purchases if we need to quickly.
So does the research for the equipment come out of the business office? Are they researching or is it a different department?
So, and I'll present this a little bit later, keeping Ogden safe, we have work groups, and one of them is personal protective equipment, and that is chaired by Ken Crawford
Okay.
in Student Services.
Susan?
I guess I'm just curious, if we provide all the teachers a thermometer or a way to measure temperature, have we considered the cost of that yet?
We do, so every school has some non-touch thermometers already.
Oh.
And we've done that as part of our summer learning experience, but it's only one or two at the school site. There may be a need to increase that depending on, again, how rapidly things change over the course of the next several weeks and months as we open up the school year. There may be a need to require or have more.
Yeah.
Any other comments with regards to that item in consent calendar? Hello, Jennifer.
We have federal money for the disinfectant and all of that.
Is there a reason why I can't speak for the meeting?
It's because you're eating.
It's because you're eating.
At the meeting?
Yeah. We can see you just fine.
Quite comfortable.
You can't.
She's in an RV.
So,
Trailer.
so you can't see us, but we can see you.
Yeah, I can't see the meeting.
It's hooked with the live stream, but
Well, then you got the best of both worlds.
We have IT efforting a solution.
the live stream. Okay.
Well, maybe there's something wrong on my end.
I'm not gonna touch that.
Can other people see?
I don't know, Board Member Shinoda, are you able to see the room?
I am watching it on a different screen on YouTube,
Oh, okay.
so I am not able to see it through the Google Meet app.
All right.
Okay, well, hopefully we'll get that worked out between now and 6 o'clock. Let's go through.
Sarah just said they can't see it through Google Meet.
So Google Meet is not working.
So question in terms of process, if I have to share my screen through Google Meet, will they be able to see it?
Yes.
Yes. But the camera to look at the room currently is not an option.
Yes. That's great.
Not currently.
Yeah, Casey, Mr. Bound?
Yeah, it's working as designed, as we have all the other times before. And so I would just advise that anyone who's on the Meet that wants to see the room, just open up another browser and actually view the live chat for the live stream. And they will see everything. It'll be a little bit delayed, but everything is working as expected.
I know in times past they've been able to see through Google Meet the view from that camera on the tripod in the past.
So
Another thing that we're not able to see remotely is when we speak, we're not featured on the YouTube feed. And I don't believe that we can
I
be
can
heard to the
switch.
YouTube feed either.
I mean, like I could switch.
The Google
when we switch scenes, it'll pick that up. And so as Xander kind of navigates who's talking, he will switch to the scene that will pipe in that audio and this video to the live stream as before.
I saw that, thanks.
Okay. Thank you, and I'll just make note in terms of the technical aspect of our virtual meetings. Given the shift to virtual, we've put some things into place to be able to make it a possibility. I think that's worked for the short term. I think long term though, we might need to make a couple minor investments to make sure that we're streaming I don't want to say more efficiently, but even the equipment itself might be mounted a little bit differently, and the platforms might change to accommodate more of that. But grateful for what we're able to do in the short order, and just know as a board and the staff that are paying, that are online, we're looking to upgrade the ability to do that long term.
So when it comes to the budget part, I'm just gonna turn to you to say whatever needs to be said, so I want to remind people that technically what needs to happen, everything will help the company. So if we're okay, we will approve the consent calendar, and then when should I'll turn it over to superintendent as far as your action report, as far as or your superintendent's report for administrative appointment.
Okay, so I'll do an administrative appointment and then segue right into
Got it.
superintendent report.
Yes,
Is that okay?
that'd be great. Let's quickly jump to item 10, if you guys are okay with that. Let's look at those items that are found therein to see if there's anything that we could potentially move to our consent calendar. Action item 10A, the Mount Fort new course program proposal. I don't remember who's.
It was a Tim Peters.
Tim, are you there?
Yes, I'm here. So any questions you have, this is an augmented reality, virtual reality course that aligns to our IT and business pathways at the high schools. So any questions that you have about virtual reality and how we're going to run the course?
I mean, it seemed pretty straightforward. I was started thinking for a second there, it'd be like, what was that TV show that had the fun rooms that they were going in, different places, virtually not there, so it sounds great. I think it sounds good. Anybody have any questions or comments? Any reason why we could not move that to our consent calendar?
I think it sounds like an exciting step forward.
Very much so.
Yeah.
Are other schools looking at it?
Not right now. We have an instructor, Ron Proctor, who's the new computer science teacher at Mount Fort. This is an area that he has some expertise in, so we were going to try this out. We think this will be a good feeder again into, and that's the digital business pathways. So we're hoping to get, right now at Mount Fort, we offer a lot of computer science offerings, but not a lot in the business virtual reality program, so which is the broadcasting and digital media pathway. So we're going to try this out with Mount Fort, try it out for a year, and then we'll see if it catches on with the other two junior highs. But I think it will, because it's pretty exciting. It's a fun course. It's kind of where the technology is going to. So I think kids get pretty excited rather than just doing pure coding.
So I have a question.
Sure.
Tim, this is Joyce. So I'm assuming the kids are already registered for next school year. So how do you get students into this class?
And so we're just going to run one section of this. So they've identified students that are interested in this pathway. These will be for 9th grade students. They've already identified a group that would take the class. And then if it's not approved, then we would put them into another computer science offering.
Okay, thank you.
So that's 3 for 1.
Is this a class of their choice?
Yes. So the teacher's he's been talking to his 8th grade students this spring about the course and putting this up as an offering. What we've been working on with Ron is we hired him mid-year, and we've been working on developing the pathways and the types of courses that he would be teaching. And he comes to us from industry, so we've been working on his licensure and what programs he would offer. And so one of the areas that he's going to really focus on is that whole web development and the digital media piece. So this is something that, we've identified a group of kids to try this class out for the first time, but it'll just be one section.
Okay.
Any other comments?
I see. Move it to consent.
We have one comment to move it to consent calendar, I like that. Okay,
Sounds like fun.
well, does sound like a great thing, and we will move it to our consent calendar tonight. Action item 10B, the community schools Chrome purchase. This sounds very,
Consulting.
let's see, who's not gonna touch that one as well, so,
Consensual.
yeah, we're just gonna leave that one quite alone. I want
Studies.
Jennifer to know that I am getting better, not putting my foot in my mouth. I don't see who's over this, who's the one gonna present to us?
Carrie.
Karen,
It's me.
Carrie.
hi,
Yeah.
there you are, thank you.
Yeah.
Tell us
So,
about this.
Okay, I'll just say that United Way is really committed to help with our early literacy. And they do have a pocket of money available to us to spend in June. However, devices may not be available to us. We were holding on to them, and today I got word that they may not be available. I talked to United Way. There's a possibility of another pocket of funding. So it's a matter of having approval, the funding, and availability of devices all at the same time. So I'm trying to create this perfect storm here, but they are pretty confident that they can find the money to help pay for these Chromebook tablets. I've worked with Casey on this, and this is the best choice for kindergarten and fifth graders. And much more cost effective than an iPad.
So how does this tie in with what we approved about a one-to-one CARES
That
purchase?
was the,
This is Katie.
I don't remember if, was it designated certain schools?
So I will tell you, I've spoken with all the principals, and they said this was a gap, that they didn't have enough devices for their kindergarten, first grade students.
So are we overlapping is my question that came to my mind.
Yeah.
No, but I thought we funded enough for everybody to have a device.
The,
Casey, could you answer that?
yeah, the digital elevation is based on 3 through 12. This is a focus on K1, K2.
Got it, okay.
Whereas a tablet, these little kids are learning their numbers and letters, and a keyboard just isn't conducive, and that's where the iPads and the Chrome tablets really, I feel, and Carrie feels, and we feel, are good for that age group, where they can just log in with a swipe and use the apps that we've purchased and everything like that, versus giving them a Chromebook that they have to actually log in to. So.
Thank you. Any other comments from anyone? Sounds wonderful. Grateful for their willingness to help us out at these 3 schools.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you.
I hear a comment about a
Consent.
consent calendar. Okay. We'd like to have that information get out, but maybe we'll find other avenues to do that. 10C, all these items, Joyce, as far as adjustments to our board policies?
Yeah, Jessica just overwhelmed us.
She's really, she understands.
That was one after another.
Yeah.
Yes, I'm here.
Yeah. Yeah. If your tires are flat tonight, we have no idea what's going on. So there are a lot of things here. Anything that jumps out, Joyce, from your committee that you want to share now? Or do you
No,
want
some of it, a lot of it was just some minor
Correct.
changes, some wordsmithing on some policies.
And the fee schedule, I looked through that and I couldn't tell what changes were there.
Oh, that was from last month, wasn't it? Is this the second reading on fee schedule?
It's revised as of the 9th of April.
The fee schedule is kind of a complete overhaul
Yes.
of the previous one.
Now, we're talking student policy, not the schedule.
Correct, I'm sorry, yes, policy.
So for the discussion later today, Board Member Shinoda had made some recommendations to that, and we're glad to incorporate those. We'll take that back to the Policy and Law Committee, where Board Member Wilson chairs that. We will take Board Member Shinoda's commentary advice and make any changes to that and bring it back for a second reading in August.
Yeah. On the fee schedule?
The fee policy.
Fee policy,
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Okay. So Joyce, there were quite a few of them there. Anything else that we should, how would you suggest that we go through this evening?
I'm gonna compare it to my notes that I took, because I didn't show up for the meeting. I thought it was an online meeting. So I stayed home.
So Board Member Shinoda provided some considerations for all of the policies with exception to 7.1.104 with regards to substitute teachers. So if I would make a recommendation that we take the policies back to Board Policy and Law and bring them back to the board for a second reading. But 7.1.104 is up for a first reading approval if you would like.
Thanks for that clarification. I mentioned student fee policy, but there were comments on other areas too.
Yeah.
And if there were any other board members who wanted to make comment or suggestions for consideration by the Policy and Law Committee, that would be open too, because it would be going back to committee.
The Policy and Law Committee is meeting in July.
I have a question on the substitute teacher policy. Are you proposing that it be deleted? Is that what I'm reading?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
That was primarily back in the day when we ran our own
Yeah.
substitute teacher services, where we contract now third party.
Can someone remind me of the Policy and Law Committee and also what's the date for the meeting in July?
The 9th, we meet the second Thursday of each month.
Oh, okay.
And who's on it? Is that the other question?
Yes.
So as chaired by Board Member Wilson, Board Member Richards, and Board Member Blair. Staffed by Jessica, attended by myself.
Thank you.
So you need to look at your notes and go through that. I mean,
Yeah.
Are we okay? We're not gonna be in trouble if we just postpone this, are we? Okay.
No, only
Yeah.
to the comment that if board members wanted to also make further recommendations between now and when
When we meet
policy
again.
and law
Yeah.
meet to make those, and then we'll bring them back, as mentioned, in August.
So we're not gonna, we won't strike that. I'll just turn to you and say we're gonna let you as policy and law come back to us at our next meeting. And if you have any information, to get that to you by your July 9th meeting.
Do you want to make a motion to approve these for first reading, these amendments, or not?
Said yes.
Yeah, I mean, it would be
I think that
appropriate.
would be in order. That was,
That would be
stick it on the
Robert's
consent
rules.
calendar and
for first reading.
have it approved for first reading.
That would be good.
Okay.
So you just really, our public hearing for our final legal budget, Paula, is at 7 o'clock, correct?
No, it was advertised at 6,
Oh, was
so we can
advertised?
start at any time after 6.
Okay, so that was different. All right, wonderful. Obviously. I did get a notice from Doug, who's online, but he says, I can hear you, but I can't see you or respond. So I told him if he has any questions, just text me, and I will bring up any questions that Doug may have as the meeting goes on. Being that any time for a vote, it will be just those who are present for that, who can actually hear us and respond. Then, let's see, we're looking at our public hearing then, which would be pretty close to maybe 6-ish, 6:30-ish. So anything that you would like to tell us in preparation for our hearing, Zane?
I sent out an email earlier today, so you have all of that stuff in a couple of places. It's out here in the board folder, on Board Premier, as well as in the Google Doc Drive, under budget hearing. So those are the things we'll be talking about tonight. I thought, the hearing with regards to the amendment of the fiscal 20 budget will just be quick. And go through some stuff real quickly. If you have any questions, I don't see a lot of public here, and maybe there's some virtually that would have some questions, but it would be appropriate, I think, to just, when we get to that point, say we're gonna have a budget hearing on fiscal 20 budget, turn the time to me, I'll talk to you, then open it up if there's any comment or question, and then a motion to approve the final legal budget for fiscal 20 would be in order, and then move into public hearing for the fiscal 21 budget. I prepared a little bit of a PowerPoint. The superintendent and I will tag team that. And then I'll go through some other things that we went over in our budget and finance committee meeting the other day for the board's information. It would be appropriate at some point to open it up to the public for comment or question, and then call for a motion to adopt the tentative budget and set the tentative tax rate.
Sounds great. So last time we did it, if somebody was watching online, they would call in or send in their questions. And I'm assuming that will be the case tonight. Somebody will.
Hey Dane, I've got a quick question. Under the committee reports, under the Budget, Finance, and Facilities Committee, since Doug isn't here, I was gonna report that everything we covered is gonna be covered in the budget part of the hearing, so am I still gonna do a recap? I don't think.
I would just suggest that we spend our time looking at the budget information that we presented in the public hearing.
And from what I'm gathering, there was no need for a closed session tonight.
I don't think so.
Okay, so we won't mention anything associated with that as far as a report.
Right.
All right. That's pretty much it then for tonight's meeting. So stay close. We'll turn off the mics for the work session. We'll get back on about 5:59. Thank you, everyone who's watching us tonight via YouTube or whatever. We're glad that you're with us this evening. We have, it's our monthly regular school board meeting for the month of June. So we're glad that you guys are with us this evening. You can see those who are present from our business administrator and our superintendent, board members, Susan, Joyce, Nancy, myself, and virtually we have Jeremy and Jennifer with us. We have a host of people from the district watching as well and take part in a little bit. Plus, we're grateful for those that are in-house, behind the scenes, making sure this technology is working effectively. We do have one board member who is away and having a little difficulty getting us. If there's a question, he can hear us, he can't see us, and can't contact us. That's board member Barker. If something comes up that he wants us to discuss, he will text me and I will bring that up during our meeting. To begin with, we will have a few items that will be moved to our consent calendar. Everything under action item 10, under increasing student achievement, 10A, 10B, and 10C, at the time comes, we'll move that up to our consent calendar. But this evening, we will start with a moment of reverence. That will be given by our Assistant Superintendent Chad Carpenter, following which is Pledge of Allegiance will be offered under the direction of Carrie Maxon. So, Chad, are you there?
I am.
Thank you. We'll turn it over to you.
Our dear Heavenly Father, we bow our heads this evening in gratitude for the opportunity to meet in this Ogden School District School Board meeting. We're thankful for the many individuals who volunteer and share their time and expertise for the betterment of our community, our schools, and our students. We're indeed grateful for our school board and their leadership and for our superintendent and other leaders in the district. We're thankful for the parents who have entrusted us with the education and care of their precious children, and we pray for thy spirit to be with us as we make plans to continue the great work of education. At this time, we ask a special blessing that this present pandemic may be controlled, that we might be able to resume school and learning as we've done in the past. We pray that thou would watch over the caregivers, parents, students, and employees, that they may be protected. And we pray that life might be normalized and the economy and financial institutions may be strengthened. We're thankful for all of these wonderful blessings, and we pray for thy spirit to be with us this evening as we discuss matters pertaining to the school district and our students. And we ask for these things in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen.
Please stand with me as we repeat the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Carrie, and thank you, Chad. We'll have some item 4 on our agenda this evening is celebrating student achievement and superintendent celebration. So I'm just going to turn the time over to our superintendent. He can help us go through all the great things that he knows that are happening within our district.
Yeah, thank you, Board President. As is summer, the celebrations do look a little bit different. But with that, there's a lot of energy, a lot of excitement, a lot to be celebrated during the summer. We continue to offer meals to our community, and this year we're extending that later into the year than we have in the past to be able to provide that service. We also have a tremendous participation in our summer learning bridge and our summer bridge programs. Currently, we have nearly 6,000 students participating in some way as we're looking at enrollment numbers in those programs, with about 4,000 almost 4,000 of those students participating in some form of on-site learning experience. This is where Administrators and teacher teams have been very purposeful in identifying students who they're following up with, whether they're home visits, whether they're inviting them to school, looking at how students were progressing in the spring. Before we went into school dismissal, there is a tremendous outreach to our students, and some of our, well, it's along the continuum of all of our students. Some of those that struggle academically or social emotionally are having their needs met in summer like they haven't ever in the past, as well as some of our students who are participating and are succeeding at a high degree academically, are also having opportunities. So really proud of the Summer Learning Bridge, summer learning effort, and grateful to the administrators, teachers, staff that are working so hard to make that happen. As one colleague said to me out of Salt Lake, said Ogden School District really is the poster child for summer learning. And that was a fantastic compliment, and it's been recognized up and down the Wasatch Front for our efforts there and gaining a lot of interest even now. So more good news to come that I'll celebrate once some other things are confirmed, but a lot of interest in that. One data point that's fun, the Ogden School District has seen an increase in its ACT results for students. As you know, ACT is not a very sensitive measure, meaning it's hard to move the needle on ACT, but we've increased over a point on the whole composite, and Ogden High specifically in English, in that subsection of the ACT, actually increased 2 points. Now, when you say the number 2 in terms of points, it doesn't sound like a lot, unless you look at it statistically, wherein, and depending on the psychometrics behind it, but the validation studies suggest even a 2-point increase on the ACT can equate up to 15 standard deviations of improvement. So if you imagine the normal curve, it takes a lot to move 2 points, a statistically significant amount to move 2 points in one category over the composite overall, and the Ogden School District has done that, Ogden High specifically. We've seen an upward trend in that. So it's one thing, we love to see graduation increases, and we're going to see those again when those become official. You know, students have until September 30th. We're grateful for those graduation increases. It's even that icing on the cake to see not only our graduation rates increasing, but something like an ACT, a college entrance exam results, student performance is also increasing, which there should be, in many cases, well, I'll say there should be an increase or a correlation between those two things, graduation and academic outcomes. If you see it conversely, and sometimes not in our district, but you see graduation rates increase without an increase in academics as well. But that's where we are working. What does it mean to be a graduate of the Ogden School District? It is one, yes, of course, to graduate, but to have meaningful opportunities and be prepared for post-secondary opportunities once you leave the Ogden School District. So between our invested efforts in the summer and the hard work that went in last year as measured on the ACT, we're seeing trends in very positive directions and students' needs being met for those efforts. So with that, for President, unless there's questions, that concludes my celebration.
You use a lot of big words in there, you lost me at hello.
Sorry.
Just kidding. All right, with that in mind, we will turn to our consent calendar. We made reference earlier that action items 10A, B, and C were moved to the consent calendar. We had discussion on the earlier before our meeting because we do have a board, some information regarding our budget, and we'll need to have as much time for that as possible. So with those items noted to our consent calendar, I'm looking for a motion to approve the June version of our consent calendar this evening.
So moved.
Motion by Susan, is there a second?
Second.
Board member should know a second.
Board member, okay, we'll take Jeremy's for a second. Those in favor, please say aye.
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 So there's, not hear anything from Doug yet, but we'll have the motion carries. Now, part of that, our consent calendar this evening is an administrative appointment. So I'm going to turn the time over back to our superintendent to make reference to that and then move into his and the other items that you have regarding your report. And when you're through, business administrator has some items to share with us.
Sounds good. Thanks, Board President, and thanks the board for your support of the consent calendar and for specifically this administrative appointment. As you know, Ms. Shauna Haney has assumed the responsibilities as principal at Ogden High, leaving an assistant principal vacancy with her promotion. With that, a selection committee came out and unanimously supported the Jean Elder, or also known as Jeannie Elder, but Ms. Elder comes to us. She's been with the Ogden School District for, I believe, about 8 years, a few years in classroom, a few years as teacher specialist, and most recently she has been the administrative intern at Ogden High. She has a master's degree in educational technology from Boise State University, technology integration certificate from that same university, educational technology endorsement, and just brings a wealth of experience and opportunity to Ogden High. So I thank you for your approval of that. And Ms. Elder, I know you're online, hopefully you can connect, but if you wouldn't mind just saying a few comments about what this opportunity, what about this opportunity excites you, and what your experience has been this last year as an intern at Ogden High.
Absolutely. Well, good evening, everyone. And first, I want to say thank you to the board for approving this appointment. I chose Ogden, like Superintendent Nye said, I chose Ogden 8 years ago. And when I think back to 8 years, I would have never dreamed I'd be here. And I'm only here because of the people that have supported me and mentored me along the way. And that list of supporters and mentors is so long, I couldn't even begin to name them if I wanted to. But I do want to take a second and highlight some of the people who kind of gone above and beyond for me. First, Adam McMickle, he was my supervisor when I was a district teacher specialist. He always believed in me. He saw my potential. He gave me space to learn and grow, but yet he was my safety net when I needed him. And Chad Carpenter has always been such a positive role model for me and has influenced my career in so many ways. And even though he was the assistant superintendent, I always felt like he was so approachable, and just if I ever needed anything, I could reach out to him. This last year, I was an administrative intern at Ogden High, and I was surrounded by a phenomenal administrative team. And I owe so much to Luke, Heather, and Shauna for their mentorship and for their guidance, and the fact that they made me feel like a valued member of the team from day one. I'm also really grateful for my family. My husband and my children have been so supportive over the years and incredibly patient with me as I pursued schooling and new opportunities, and I'm just so grateful for them. And last but definitely not least, the staff and the students at Ogden High are incredible. And I absolutely loved working there. And to say that I'm excited to continue the work in years to come is an understatement. Ogden High is really such a wonderful place to be, and I'm honored to be a Tiger. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Elder. We wish you were here when we were under different circumstances to where we could shake your hand and congratulate you. But congratulations nonetheless. Looking for great things to come as you join that Ogden High administrative team, faculty, and students. Congratulations. Moving into my superintendent's report, Board President, I'm going to present all things work well on the screen. Great. Hopefully it's all coming through, and it's presenting here. I hope it's presenting everywhere. So I'm getting some head nods. Yes, thank you. As you know, we are in a circumstance where we experienced school dismissal for 3 months, and we still find ourselves under the yellow guidelines from the state, and the start of school is fast approaching. And with that, we are launching an effort of keeping Ogden healthy. And really what keeping Ogden healthy is our plan, our developing plan for reopening schools this fall. So as you can imagine, reopening schools, we need to assess risk. Considering where we're at with the coronavirus, COVID-19, if you will, we will mitigate a risk and against risk, but we cannot eliminate risk. I want to be clear. Anytime we bring people into a space, there is an element of risk with this virus. But we will do all that we can to prevent the spread and the community transfer of COVID-19 on our campuses, to keep our students and our staff safe. But it should be known that while we'll do all that we can, there is an element of risk associated with it. I'd imagine really the only way to mitigate against all risk is, as we experienced earlier this year, it was almost a shelter in place, stay home, stay safe, stay healthy effort that the state underwent. But all things point from the state board to the State Department of Health, from the governor's office, that there is an expectation that we will reopen schools this fall. We look forward to that opportunity, but it does present some challenges to which we are addressing. First of all, and this will be provided in board backup as part of my report, but there are some mitigation levers that we can pull on. To do that, we need to understand what the virus does and how it does it. And so that's what this chart really begins to drill down into. So as we take a look at how the virus reproduces, how it, the infectiousness of it or the contagion of it, and we're looking, what does it look like to isolate symptoms? What does contact tracing look like? You'll see how we're going to do that, meaning if an individual is identified or tests positive for COVID-19, contact tracing suggests that we kind of know who that person was around and where they were in an effort to be a little bit more strategic in how we go about any response. Minimize outbreak and the infectiousness of it. We look at group size, interaction outside of the core air quotes bubble. A lot of this coming from the Levitt partners, who has also informed Utah System of Higher Education, our universities and tech colleges. But how the virus is doing it? Well, it does it through close contact, respiratory droplets, and fomite contact. So we're looking at how do we address mitigating against it? Well, it comes down to physical distancing, respiratory hygiene. That's where the face masks and the coverings come into play, where social distancing isn't able to be maintained. As we look here, we're all about 6 feet apart. If we weren't, it would be very appropriate for us to be wearing face masks under these conditions. And then physical hygiene. What does it look like for not only personal hygiene, but personal protective equipment and sanitation procedures on our campuses. So as we look at that, we have to address several different things, right? As we open our campuses, as you can imagine, as we bring 1,200 kids onto a high school campus, what does movement look like? What does duration in terms of interaction look like? Again, that physical distancing or proximity. How big groups should be. How are we going to control for respiratory output? Things that are touched. And what are those congestion points, high traffic areas, where, as you can see by that diagram, what are those pinch points? So keeping Ogden healthy, we've essentially are in the process of developing that plan. Part of that effort has been to identify work groups, specific work groups that target the following: sanitation and hygiene. We'll go into a little bit more about that. What does personal protective equipment needs for the district look like? So we talked social physical distancing. How might that be realized? Student engagement, which is incredibly nuanced given how rapid things can change as we saw this spring. How are we going to maintain student engagement? And last but certainly not least, a focus on student and staff well-being. So you can imagine that there has been an increased awareness and toll, stress, and even some frustration with the current conditions that we find ourselves in across our community and nation and the world. So with that, sanitation and hygiene, just a brief overview. We are developing and providing staff training on sanitation and hygiene strategies. Along with that comes protocols for increasing the hygiene regimen, right? What do the hand sanitizing stations look like when students come into the classroom, they come into the cafeteria? What is the expectation there? Disinfecting wipes, other disinfectants, we're using different products. Virex is what it's called. What does that increased sanitation effort look like on those highly touched surfaces and items, which would include all of those things, right? Even playgrounds, certainly shared items. How do we make sure that they're sanitized and disinfected through a systematic sanitation? What does that schedule look like? How often? Which surfaces? And making plans to address that. Steve Torman is heading up that effort, and we're consolidating again with all of these work groups. What does it look like when it comes to hygiene and sanitation to make sure? Personal protective equipment is a heavy lift. It's a big lift, but we need to develop and provide staff training on the use of that PPE. What are those protocols when physical distancing is not feasible? Face coverings, what do those look like? We're exploring what does it look like for masks or face shields, and please feel free to interrupt, or I should pause for questions or comments. But as some schools are looking at what does a face mask instead of the face shield look like instead of a mask, so the child can see a smile, right, from their teacher versus it being covered up, and addressing that, exploring those options when. And as you know, teachers get down, they work one-on-one with kids, shoulder to shoulder. Yeah.
So on occasion, we'll hear about people that have certain medical conditions that they aren't able to wear the mask, especially all day at school. So are we, how are you able to find out who might need something different? Like
One-on-one,
maybe the shield.
right? Maybe the shield, certainly for staff, working with their administrators specifically to make those accommodations where that physical distancing can't be realized. Working one-on-one with staff, and I would say families as well for students. There's going to be some children and some exceptions that need to be made for various reasons that would preclude their ability for a host of different reasons for wearing a mask. Or a face covering of some sort. So it will be a one-by-one effort to determine what those needs are on each of our campuses. To that end, we have circulated a survey to the community and to our own employees. What are some of their concerns or considerations for reopening schools? And that's been one of them. That's already come out in a couple instances where they're sharing on their own volition that they have concerns because of such and such reasons that maybe they aren't able to wear a mask or aren't able to do a face shield or whatever it may be, but provisions will be made.
Or they have the choice to stay home and be online if they can't.
Depending on, and that's one thing that still needs to be ascertained is what number of our students, and I'll get into student engagement in a moment, and families will choose to pursue online or some model of blended learning, right? Where they're choosing to stay home. And then we could, at that point, be able to ascertain whether or not of our staff who might still be able to provide that, who may have a similar, might be a high risk individual, and working with HR specifically on making those accommodations. We're developing protocols for students that are wearing masks, again, particularly when engaged in contact longer than 15 and within 15 minutes and within 6 feet of one another. Again, a lot of this coming out of, even today, the Utah State Board of Education met in a special board session to provide some, and I'll get to it in just a moment, some recommendations. And they are making some recommendations to the governor's office as to what might be tight in terms of expectations of local education agencies and what are recommended or loose recommendations, and we'll see those soon. Transportation protocols, what does it mean to board a bus and do so safely, knowing that there's only so many seats and we really like to pack them in, right, in there, but we're developing transportation protocols that include assigned seating, face covering. I imagine this will be a tight expectation from the State Board of Education that anyone riding on buses are required to make or wear some form of face covering. But again, that'll be very specific to any individuals that might need different considerations. And then we're developing symptom checking protocols. Board Member Richards, as you had mentioned, what does it look like for temperature and taking temperatures and non-contact thermometers, things like that. So we are developing those symptoms, because one of those efforts in mitigating or pulling on the levers is isolating symptoms, right? And a large community campaign saying, if you are not well, do not come to school, right? I mean, we say that every year, but this year it's even more so. If there are any symptoms involved, please remain at home. Social physical distancing in school, we're developing protocols, again, to address this very issue. We know that some of the recommendations of our classrooms simply just cannot allow desks to be 6 feet apart. We simply do not have the room. But we're going to develop and provide staff training on physical distancing. Again, assigned seats. Non-essential activities. We're going to have to look at those one by one. What do assemblies look like, dances, etc. Removing unnecessary furniture in a classroom or devices in a classroom to maximize the space there. What does it look like to identify some of those larger spaces and their use a little bit differently? What are our high traffic areas? And what would a floor marking look like to direct foot traffic? The beautiful thing about this, if you've been in our elementaries, I know you have, but we walk on the right. We go up the right, we come down on the left, you know, that when we're going up the staircase, things like that. So a lot of those have been in place already for simple execution of moving through a school, but we'll have to make that more pronounced. What are entry exit flow paths to minimize congestion, and even limiting non-essential visitors, volunteers, knowing that if we have quite a few visitors and volunteers that come into our schools, but how do we identify one when they come to us? What does a symptom check look like? Even verbal, even the non-touch thermometer, a face mask being provided for entry into our schools. Again, it's really limiting the end size or the number of people in our facilities that might possess or pass the contagion. Drop-off pickup protocols, again, our schools do a great job with this, generally anyway, to be able to maximize the flow and minimize congestion. Even things like recesses, what does a staggered recess look like? As well as cafeteria procedures that would include staggered lunches, decreased lunch times, etc. We're brainstorming these ideas, putting the plans in place, and it is very school specific. As you can imagine, it's very school specific. And I'll use an example of a Horace Man. Now, granted, we have a big, beautiful Horace Man being built, and the progress on that is phenomenal. It's not going to be ready anytime soon. But the existing facility has very narrow halls and a very reduced footprint for playground space under these conditions. Those protocols are going to look very different than a new Bridget, where the walls or the halls are very wide and they have a lot of space because of its structure and design. So we are working and providing some resources to help develop those plans at the school site at that level.
As it relates to our secondary schools and sports, what have you heard? I mean, how do you play a football game and
Social distance.
don't touch me, I'm gonna score a touchdown, leave me alone.
Practicing.
But have you heard any feedback from on high?
Well, there's a couple different sources in that, right? And I imagine we're going to get a little bit more direction as it pertains to that specifically. But UHSAA, right, the high school association activities for sports. But anyway, they have released some guidelines, and right now, under the current conditions, under the yellow conditions, we're able to hold some practices, summer practices. We're able to have some weight room time. Now, those are all come with increased hygiene and sanitation, and there has been some competition. Really, the concern at the moment has been in the stands, not necessarily what's occurring on the court or the field. But currently, there are some guidelines there that we still receive to limit the number of people in our stands. Family groups need to be separated 6 feet apart or more, and if there are instances where in the current guidelines, where there are instances where social distancing might not be maintained between family groups, that there is an expectation that masks are worn. right? So we do have that, but we'll look into what fall sports looks like and receive some more information there. But as of the moment, under the current conditions, they are able to practice and hold summer camps and things like that. Student engagement, just quickly, provide educator training on student engagement strategies. We're continuing to look and develop our capacity, as this board knows, on remote or other learning options for students who choose to remain at home, increasing those options. We also need to identify and have begun the process of identifying courses, classes that are more at risk. As you can think about lab space or choir, these are high contact, high congestion, high probability of exposure type settings, and developing strategies for those. As much as we like to be nimble, the best laid plans happen before an event occurs, and the execution of those plans, or the success of the execution of those plans, happens based on that preparation. But we are developing strategies for what does it look like in the event of another school dismissal. Now, I've also put up there site dismissal. Let's say there's an outbreak in one of our schools. How do we, for one school, maintain continuity in the learning experience, in the student engagement experience, even though a campus may be closed as opposed to other campuses within our school district that are not? And class dismissal. If we have a situation where a student tests positive or a staff member tests positive for COVID-19 in a class, and we can, through contact tracing, going back to that concept, identify that really the exposure was limited to that classroom, what does it look like for a classroom or a grade level to be dismissed and not the entire school? But we will be working very, very closely with the health department to make that determination once there is, and because there will be, once there is a positive result that occurs on our campuses sometime this next year. But we are planning what does that look like for strategies. We're looking at what does the expanded use of our learning management system or Canvas look like to deliver instruction, and increasing staff's ability to deliver instruction there. One thing we definitely don't want to be guilty of is just posting assignments for students to complete in Canvas. That is a level of engagement, but I would suggest that it's not a level of instruction. So how do we move from that and grow our capacity to be more proficient, I'll use that word, proficient in delivering instruction in a learning management system. So that group's working on those types of things, as well as developing what does it look like when our students do a return, to screen students, assess students, to determine what their learning has been and what we're going to do about it if there has been learning loss. As you can imagine, over the last 6 months, even though we've invested and our students are being serviced quite well during the summer break through our summer learning and summer bridge, we still will have to ascertain to what degree has there been learning loss, and then put plans into place for students specifically to address that. Last but not least, wellness of students and staff. This work group really working on strategies for meeting the emotional and social needs of our educators, of our staff. And I've said this, when I say educators, anyone that works or volunteers for the Ogden School District is an educator, right? That's our business. But educators includes all of our staff. What is that additional stress? What are those that are related to workloads? And what are we going to do about that in terms of providing resources and support, and doing the same thing for kids? As you can imagine, these are times, and some students process it differently. We want to make sure that we're there for them, to make sure that your needs are being met. You're in a safe place. This is a safe environment. We're going to do all that we can to make sure you have a good experience learning on our campuses. To that end, we'll monitor absences, organize home visits to students and families accordingly as a result, to be able to continue to provide those services. And I really like this. This was shared by Aspen Henderson, our Director of Student Advocacy Services. But working, parenting, teaching are 3 different jobs that cannot be done at the same time. It's not hard because you're doing it wrong. It's hard because it's too much. Do the best you can. When you have to pick, because at some point you will, choose connection. And it really is about that connection with kids and the relationships we build, regardless of the hat that we wear. So I appreciate that leadership there in that group addressing those. We don't want to lose sight of the care beyond just academics and instruction and learning and food services. But what does it really mean for us as the Ogden School District to prioritize how we're meeting the social, emotional, and wellness of our students and staff in these trying times and providing those resources and supports. Just quickly, this is hot off the press, June 11th, State Board approved a process and timeline. This is the process and timeline. We are subjected to it in a good way, I think, in a way that the rest of the state can align. June 16th and 17th, that's just been the last couple days. Some cross-functional groups meet to propose minimal requirements under the color-coded risk phases, as you remember, red, orange, yellow, green, and they're doing the work of that. Today, the board has been discussing, state board, been discussing and debating what the minimum requirements are. Again, these are, what are those expectations that are tight, meaning LEAs have to abide by, versus what is our recommendations or what is loose, that is something that is recommended to schools and school districts but not necessarily required. They've worked through that document, and I would anticipate a template will be coming our way very soon for us to fill out, meeting the minimum requirements or those expectations. And again, our work groups, I feel like we're already ahead of the curve here because our work groups are already answering many of those questions. But I do anticipate a template coming to us that we would have to send to them to be approved, and we'd also share with our local health department. That will be shared tomorrow with the Utah Leads Committee, and sometime next week, the state board is proposing that the governor incorporates these minimum requirements by executive order, and then would make a public announcement. Then USB will publish further guidance. We'll be invited at that point on June 25th or 26th, they're both days, some planning webinars for us to take all that it is that we've done and put it in a way that meets the requirements of the state. And then as soon as that happens, we will roll out, and the board will be aware before it goes public, of course, but we'll roll out what keeping Ogden healthy means to our community. Having met the requirements of the state under these guidelines, and what parents can expect when school starts this fall. So that's the timeline there. And really, I've said a lot, knowing that there is a lot more information to come, but are there any other questions or comments regarding the effort?
We have this presentation.
Yes, I will share it with you, and also Paula will have it to post in board book, but I'll share you specifically on the Google presentation.
I just, first of all, I want to tell you how impressed I am with all this forethought. But also, the question is, how can we best, I'm sure there are some thoughts and ideas of how we're going to best present this kind of information to parents when it gets to that point.
Great question. In a multitude of ways and across several venues. And so one idea that we're looking at is even creating like these 90-second or 60 to 90-second videos of a classroom being sanitized, right? And publishing it out on social media and our website, showing this is what we're doing for our hygiene and sanitation. Your child comes to school, when they go to lunch, here are these hand sanitizing stations that they get some hand sanitizing, just these quick little spots that show what it is that they can expect. And again, pushing it out across. And I would say go so far as to make it obviously on our websites, but too on our schools' websites. So you can imagine if you're a parent of a child at Heritage, you'll probably go to the Heritage website rather than Ogden SD. We just want to make sure, .org, our main website, make sure that those policies, protocols, procedures are outlined there, complemented by these 90-second spots. It just does a world, right? I mean, you can read a document that says a classroom will be sanitized. It's a whole new thing to see actually happening, right? And being able to share that with people. Of course, across all of our social media platforms, and we would send it with the media at large to make sure that we're circulating it as widely and broadly as we can. And I would say to that end, it would be very appropriate for the use for each school to send out on their listservs, whether email or text or PR fill in the blank, a link to that information as well.
And then I noticed the survey that came out for parents. When will the results for that survey be known?
So we're efforting that as we speak. We've had a tremendous response already, but we are currently, literally as of yesterday and today, starting to analyze. Each of us are looking at those results. I would hope to have something to the board within the next week or two at the latest, in regards to what that feedback has been.
Okay, great. I think I've heard from parents anywhere from just let the kids go back to school, I don't care what they do, to there's no way I'm gonna let my kids go back to school unless they do this and this and this and this. And so I think there's a lot of concern, so the sooner and we can let parents know what's happening and what we're doing, I think the better.
Correct.
Great, and I agree. And one of the tight expectations the board has been debating, state board, is that we would have to make that public by August 1st at the latest. We would effort to do better than that, than August 1st in many ways. But one thing that they were also debating is whether or not to require local boards to approve the plan before submitting it to the state board, which would then, that we don't have a current, I'll let you know, right? We don't have a current board meeting scheduled in July. But I'll bring it to your attention. If the state board requires it, we may need to schedule a special session just on the radar.
And I think if that were the case, it'd be great for us to know what we're gonna do.
Yep, before that. Yep.
Here's your left, here's your right.
Yep.
It is very impressive, the amount of forethought and detail that involved. Any other questions?
Task force.
Yeah, the task force, well done. Any other comments from anyone? Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. All right, it's now time to have our business administrators reports. As I know from all of you, anything you don't want to say before, you want to save it all for the budget meeting, go right ahead.
Yeah, let's say it.
Okay, all right. That'd be great. Okay, then we're gonna jump to our committee reports very quickly, just a brief response, and I understand, I think Jeremy, Doug spoke with you to share a couple of things as regards to our most recent budget and finance facilities meeting. So we'll listen, hear from Joyce, then Jen, then Jeremy.
Okay, so we met last Thursday for policy and law, and as I look at my notes, even though it seems like we had quite a few, we had a lot more that were discussed in the meeting. There were 13 policies that we actually touched on. I'm just gonna go in order on my notes. 9.9406, 9.4406 on communicable diseases. The part of it was incorporating the return to school in the fall, but we also just briefly talked about, on there we actually specify HIV, and so we talked about removing that and just leaving it as communicable diseases. We also talked on the substitute teacher, and the recommendation was to remove that since it is a line item in the budget anyway. 7.3.300, that one was, because it talked about district attorney, and we wanted it, so people don't think it's the district attorney for Weber County, to make sure it's worded correctly, that it's the school district's attorney. And I don't know if Jessica's on there, correct, or Nancy and Susan. We also recommended to delete the line about employees contacting the attorney directly. And I won't talk about the ones that were not on the list yet. 8.5.501, the freedom of expression and assembly. I think we decided that was pretty much in good shape. But we made a decision last month that we would review every policy that had not been looked at in the last 10 years. So that we stay in the decade, I guess. Right. Then 8.503, controversial issues, just minor changes to align with what the State Board of Education have in their policy. I don't think we had any real major things that we talked about with that one. 9.200. Oh, that was also to comply with the changes from the state, the student fee policy. Then 9.3309, that's mostly just changing on procedure, not at all on the board policy.
Electronic.
Do you want me to touch on the ones that, or save those for July? No,
Actually, I certainly don't want to tell you what to do.
Yeah.
You can say those, though.
Now we're gonna
Okay.
come back on those, yeah.
And I think that was it. There were a number that we talked about that it was just, we will update the date of, that it's been reviewed because there were no changes
91.
recommended. Yeah, so back in the last century.
So,
Yeah.
so the policies are good and everything,
Yeah.
and then we'll just.
We're just working through those. Yeah,
Well, thanks, committee, and thanks, Jessica.
yes.
And if you don't mind, can I add one thing?
Please.
All right, so we wanted to take a look at our policies that are related to current events going on right now. So we've reviewed the communicable diseases just given light of COVID-19, and then we wanted to make sure to review any of our policies that are with regards to racism or discrimination to make sure that we are in line with what we should be in line with and that we're ready to provide training for our employees, our parents, and our students for when school starts again so that we can be in line and address those issues and current events right now.
Thank you.
Well done. Appreciate the forethought from this committee. Thanks. Anything else, Joyce?
That's all, thank you.
Jen?
Okay, the Student Achievement Committee met, and we had one thing on our agenda. We thought our meeting would be short, but it ended up going longer than anticipated by all of us because it's a pretty weighty conversation, and that is about the dual language immersion programs that we have at T.O. Smith and as well as Bonneville. Some information was shared, ideas were thrown out. I think the reason why it went so long, the conversation went so long, is because we realized that there's a lot of information that we need to gather yet, and some questions that we anticipate board members are going to have about how we deal with T.O. Smith with them being bused to Gramercy for the next year and a half. What does DLI, what happens with DLI there and future when they go back? Anyway, there are a lot of issues with the DLI program. We value the program, and I think there's just some more questions to be answered, more information to gather. And so that's about it, unless somebody else remembers anything differently.
No, thank you.
I have a question, Jen. So for
Yeah.
DLI, are the numbers of students participating increasing, decreasing, state level? Did they talk about that at all?
State level or, state level. I believe that we have, it depends on the grade. And I think the numbers are going down, maybe.
One of the statistics that I remember was that 50% of the students that started first grade had stayed with the program.
Yeah, we need more attention, to stabilize those older grades. as well as, one of the concerns with the moving of TO was, how many of those students will move to the program. So we're not sure what those numbers are going to look like this next year, them being across the board.
Thanks.
Thanks, Jennifer. Anything else? Anybody would like to ask committee? Okay. Jeremy, you ready to talk about budget and finance?
Most of the material that we covered in the Budget, Finance, and Facilities Committee meeting were the attachments in the public hearing agenda item. So I think I'll leave it to Zane to cover that later.
Good move.
We talked about, certified tax rate calculation, value of the BDO coming out of the RDA. What the impact of taxes on the average value of the house in Ogden. The cost of living increase and step increase, what it would cost and how that compared to the BDO revenue. We took a deep dive in each of the 7 funds that make up the budget. And we were introduced to the 2 different scenarios for the general obligation bonds, paying them back between a 15-year and 20-year scenarios. We pay them back earlier, we save the taxpayers about $1 million. Zane, do you have anything to add?
I don't have anything to add.
Well done.
That's it.
Thanks, Jeremy. Appreciate those reports, and I failed to ask, and no one for public participation this evening. Great. So we're going to now, as was mentioned earlier, items under number 10 on our agenda, increasing student achievement, we're all moved up to our consent calendar. So now we're going to, the reason for this meeting tonight, or one of the reasons, is to have a public hearing for the final legal budget for the 2019 and 2019 this current school year. So I'm going to turn the time over to Zane Wolstenhume, our business administrator, to lead us through these next 2 items on our agenda, public hearing for final legal budget and proposed budget for the 2021 year.
Thanks. I'm gonna try my luck in person. Okay, so this information is in your packet, as well as I have these documents out on a Google Drive for the board to look at. But this, in a 1-page shot, is what our budget looks like. Final legal budget for the current year that will end the end of this month. And you can see that what the fund balances are projected to be for each of the funds. Something new this year is this Fund 61. You haven't seen that before. That's an internal service fund that we are using now, and it's in keeping with accounting guidelines to keep track of our self-insurance program. So this is going to be very transparent to the board. You can see what's going on with this. And so that's what's new. And I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this, but you can see for each of the funds, there are tax levies associated with that. One thing else that's new this year is the charter school levy. We're supposed to start accounting for that in Fund 26. And so it used to be that levy was shown as part of the M&O fund. We never did see any money from that levy per se, but we have to now account for that money the same as we do the money in our RDAs. And actually, we had to start doing that last fiscal year, and one of my deans in the audit showed that we had an over budget line in Fund 26, and that was because we had to account for this charter school money that we hadn't done. And so one of the things that's different about what we're looking at tonight and what we looked at in our budget committee meeting the other day was the change to the tax increment fund. It, as of today, was changed to include that charter school revenue. And it's just shown as a pass-through. So even though it's part of our budget, it's not money we ever see or spend. But we have to show it as if we received it and as if we spent it, as far as our budget goes. So, and you can see down there how the budget is spent in our Fund 10 and the total. So,
Same.
yes,
Question about the charter school money.
okay.
So does it just pass through your hands to them?
I don't even get to touch it. I just get to assess the tax, and it's collected at the state tax commission level and allocated out to the districts from there to the state board and then out to the charters. So, if you go down further, this summary right here will show you what the fiscal 20 budget, original budget was, what the final legal budget is proposed. You can see what the revisions are and where those revisions are, and then what the change is for the current year. You're also seeing on this sheet 3 years prior actual information, so you can give you some context for how things are looking, and also this document includes what the proposed budget, the original budget for the fiscal 21 year is, and what the change is from what the final legal budget is. So I like this little snapshot because it's a 5-year look, and you can see what the details are. So this is a summary of all the funds, and if you go down in this document, you can see there is a shot there of what's going on in each of the funds. So there's a lot of action going on in Fund 10. If you look at Fund 10, you'll notice projected revenues are down $500,000, but projected expenditures are down $1 million. We talked a little bit about that at the last, in our work session, about some of the savings that we realized because of the COVID situation and where that came from. So as such, and because we ended the year better last year, our final legal budget fund balance is projected to be at about $14 million. So our fund balance policy recommends that we stay between 10 and 25. I've mentioned before, my sweet spot is 15. And this is about 14%. So I think we're in an okay place as far as where we think we'll be at the end of fiscal 20. And next year's a little bit different story. But so Fund 21, this is the fund where the school accounts are held. This is one of those funds where I got dinged with the audit. I was being too conservative in my budget projections. So we just plugged in a number for budget that we know is going to cover us. Fund 26, again, this is the tax increment financing fund, and you'll notice a big revision for fiscal 20, and that has primarily to do with that charter school levy that we talked about in the budget for the next year. Basically, at this point, we don't know what it will be, so we budget the same as the current year. Fund 31 is where we're paying our debts. You'll notice we're pretty close to budget on that. We're gonna come out a little better on our fund balance in that fund. That would be a problem if we weren't making debt service payments. But we know that we are, and whatever we carry over there gets spent in the next year, so. Fund 32, you'll notice some $10 million in a budget revision there in expenditures. Primarily it has to do with our construction program. And so we try to make sure we budget enough for that, and the same for next year. We're gonna be very aggressively building buildings for the next couple of years, and we'll see a lot of expenditures in our capital outlay budget. Fund the 49s, our food service fund. Things are going pretty much according to budget at this point. Looks like we may not get as much federal revenue as we otherwise would because of mill counts. We're reimbursed based on mill counts.
So are they gonna have to eat any of their budget?
They've got to eat it all.
Okay, that's one right there.
Fortunately, they're in a good position. In fact, we can get into trouble if you have more than you need. And we're authorized to have 3 months operating expense as carryover. So we've been able to aggressively renovate our kitchen facilities the last few years, and that whole thing continues. This fund is paying for a lot of the improvements that are made to the Wasatch elementary kitchen, which those of you who were able to join us on that tour saw a lot of that equipment over there. So Fund 61, this is that new internal service fund that I was telling you about. So if you don't have any other questions about the fiscal 20 budget, at this point we'd probably open that up for public questions or comments. And then at some point, motion would be in order to approve the final legal budget for fiscal 19-20.
We will open it up officially at this time, just a couple minutes after 7 o'clock. If there's anyone who's on the hall or would like to join us, we'll give them a few minutes if anybody would want to come this evening. I will say that some of these make a comment. We have these reports, and as we discussed them the other day, I felt like it was good to have all the board members be aware of these reports. And there are a couple of things that have been added from previous years that we were appreciative of, and we feel like this evening we've got a couple of bookends here with our superintendent being very thoughtful and not making sure everything's set with regards to our health for the coming year, and with our business administrator the same thing as on our financial situation. These are difficult times, and we are sitting in a pretty good spot as a district, so we're very fortunate to have the individuals that we do leading us at this point in time. Any other comments while we wait? We'll just give for legal purposes just a moment or two longer if someone decides they want to show up. I actually had one person call me today specifically about it. This person had seen the article in the newspaper and was curious to know what some of the plans are and thoughts of where we're at. And so it is on the minds of people in our community as far as how are we doing, well, financially, what the future will be. So sure. Casey, our tech team is looking and we're not seeing anyone. We haven't need to call our resource officers to keep people from pounding down the doors to get in. So they were on alert tonight just in case. When Casey gets back, if no one else, if he chose no one showing, then
Just a question for Zane. When you receive funding, whether it's local or state, do you get it one time annual, or is it broken up by quarters?
So good question and an interesting answer. So the the local funding is primarily property tax revenue. And the property tax revenue is collected by the county treasurer, and they usually send us a check, literally, or in the form of they actually don't write us a check, they send us a notice that they've transferred some money into our account at the state treasurer's office. So we have, most of our property tax money goes into the public treasurer investment fund, and that's where that money's
And that's
kept.
a one-time,
What's
they
that?
do it all at once.
So every month, whatever they've collected for the month, they send it there and they tell us, here's for the tax levy, here's for redemptions that were collected, and here's for fee in lieu that was received. And so
Well,
that
some people may
happens.
not pay theirs
Right, okay.
on time.
Yeah, redemptions are.
So it's monthly, what they receive monthly.
Yeah, it's what they collect every month and they forward that to us. The state money, is sent to us every month in an electronic transfer. And we get an allotment memo at the end of the month that said, here's what your transfer is gonna be, and it's actually very detailed, and it shows us, if you recall, the minimum school program is made up of several different line items, and that allotment memo tells us how much we got for every one of those line items. And so we get that transfer once a month, and we book that revenue as it comes. The federal money, we also, most all of it flows through the State Board of Education. And that money we have to spend, most all of it, the federal money, we have to spend it first and then request reimbursement once we've spent it. And so our goal in the business office is to at least claim those reimbursements quarterly. But they'll flow through the state board. They show up on that allotment memo that I just told you about when that money comes. Occasionally we have federal direct grants, and we get that money direct from the federal government. Most of those, Gear Up is a good example of a federal direct grant. And that money will flow to us directly from either like Department of Education or we're applying for a juvenile justice grant right now, and it would flow through a different agency of the federal government. But again, we usually have to spend it, claim reimbursements, and we get that money.
I don't mean to throw a curveball. Do you know what the PTIF interest rate is right now that they're paying us?
Not very much. I don't know exactly what it is off the top of my head. It's less than 1%. Yeah.
There was a time years ago when we were doing our last major bond, that interest rates at that point in time were inverted, that we were getting 5%.
Yeah.
So we actually issued bonds and put it in the bank.
Yeah.
We were able to score a little bit there.
No, it's it's interesting. The interest thing cuts both ways.
Yeah.
We're saving a lot of money right now as a district in interest costs because we're able to borrow at the cheap. And I don't see that changing.
In the foreseeable future.
Yeah.
Well, thank you. With that, it doesn't appear to be anyone's here this evening would like to make comments. So with the report that was shared, I'm looking for a motion to approve the final legal budget for the 2019-2020 school year.
So moved.
Motion's made by Susan. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Nancy. Those in favor, please say aye.
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 All right, I think Jen said aye as well.
She did.
Okay. Motion carries. Thank you. Zane will now just let you move on to the next part.
I'm actually gonna stop presenting and let the superintendent start presenting. We're gonna tag team on a little PowerPoint, and then I'll get into some other things where I will start presenting again, so.
Thank you, Zane, and give credit where credit due. Zane put together this PowerPoint for us to walk through, so thanks for doing that as well. As we take a look at this next fiscal year, understand even at this moment, the state legislature is in session debating such things as the state budget, which does affect our budget. But with that, there are some highlights that I made you aware of last night to be addressed here. One, well, I'll just take a look at this. As you recall, there was a 2, 5, or 10% budget cut proposal that the state board was considering in terms of recommendation to the legislature. Public education appropriations went through the practice of doing a 2, 5, 10% cut to education and to the tune of $380 million at the 10% level. That was then, those recommendations were forwarded to the Executive Appropriations Committee of the legislature. And they had a good debate, and as of recent, and what is being proposed during this special session is that education funds don't necessarily get cut. With that being said, there is some movement, I will say, of funds from one area to another. For example, that to say there isn't a cut isn't altogether captures everything that's going on at the legislature right now, right? So, for example, there may be a cut to a specific line item in one area, but an increase to funds in another area. For example, that's where the state revenue. MOST, which is an acronym, math, something science, and
It used to be U-Star.
it used to be U-Star, thank you, and that was another acronym for something else, right? But there was one proposal coming out of Executive Approps to reduce that, as well as the flexible allocation, library books, may be likely cut. But on the other hand, there's more optional extended day kindergarten funds. Or, as I shared with you last night, there is a proposal to give a 1.8% increase on the WPU. So again, you add in one area, you might be taking away in another. Overall, it does not represent a cut. Actually, it represents about a 1.3% increase to education funding, right? So there is still movement in that budget. They're obviously working on it right now, but that we will know that coming out of the special session to inform what our budgets will be for fiscal 21, depending on where the legislature lands, hopefully today and tomorrow if needed. Other major budget considerations, as you're already aware of, we made some significant curriculum purchases the last couple of years, and those purchases are being still realized into this next fiscal year. You know, we have plenty of projects going on. My daughter asked, why is there a hard hat rumbling around the back seat of my car? And I explained it to her, but it's exciting. And I was able to explain that to her, that there is that investment. With that comes some general obligation bond payments.
You didn't tell her it's for the school board, your own protection?
Why not?
It was not, it's
Own
not that.
protection.
Oh, that's good, thank you.
And anyway, yes, yeah, I could go on with that. She had some fun. She's my teenager, at the moment, 1 of 3. But some highlights, as I mentioned, they are talking about a 1.8% increase on the WPU. It could be considered an inflation adjustment. Again, that's projected. It does create a new WPU value. Again, you take from one area, add to another. At the end of the day, I believe what the legislature is doing is good for education, considering the economic forecast and the circumstances our state is facing. I'll say this, that other state-funded agencies and efforts, they're not faring as well in this space, right? Cuts have to be made at some level given the economic downturn associated with COVID-19. Education, you talk to Senate leadership, House leadership, and our representatives generally, they're really seeking to hold education and social services as harmless as possible under these conditions. And just some technical information there. That MSP, or the minimum school programs, highlighted. We have received, and we We are down 95 students in enrollment, which does come at a cost. That will also be factored into this next year's funding. Obviously, fewer students, we look at certain staffing ratios to absorb that. That's not looking to do a reduction in force under that. We're able to assume that through attrition and redeployment of other resources. Property values have changed. The growth in taxable property valuation, as you can see, is 20.09%. And Zane, I'll let you talk a little bit what the board, I think the board's aware, but if there are any details you want to fill in. BDO, RDA came off the books, and there is an opportunity for the district. And as you recall, some of those, and we talked about it in the Budget, Facilities and Finance Committee, some of those, some of that revenue will be absorbed in something we've already done with salaries.
I'll share some of that detail in a few minutes, but yeah, you've probably never seen a 20% increase in your property valuation, and a little over half of it is new growth, and most of that, about 466 million of that new growth, has to do with the BDO RDA.
Yep. Which is great, a decision made 20 years ago that's going to affect us in a positive, big way today. So appreciate that. Zane will go into that more. Again, we're not sure where the legislature will land. So in terms of what the compensation looks like, or there's any adjustments to salary or through negotiations, there's a process for that, but that's still to be determined. And of course, you have been made aware of the 3.75% increase in enhanced benefits in health insurance. So more information to come there. Where does our revenue come from? Well, about $159 million. 46% of that is local, 41% state, and 13% federal, which is in keeping. So you can see the different efforts there as it pertains to those revenue sources. Expenditures, similarly, salaries, benefits, purchase services, supplies, equipment, and a sliver of other, or 30% of other, goes into the overall expenditures of our budget as proposed for this next year. Zane, I imagine, is going to go into a few more details with that as well. You see the projected fund balances for those different areas. Property tax considerations, the fiscal 20 rate was 0.008392, meaning for every $100,000 of taxable value on a property, it was $839.20. For fiscal 21, because of the increase in property values, there is a decrease in the tax rate. And with that being said, it's at 0.008017. So all things considered, when at least the school district's effort on the property taxes that people will be receiving, they should see a decrease in that way, although
They may not see a decrease in their bill.
they may not see a decrease in their bill.
Increased.
Right, so if the home value
I'll get into
increases.
the details of that.
Yeah, but the district isn't collecting that amount. If we were to collect and adjust the tax rate, we would have to go through truth and taxation, and that would generate additional revenue for that effort. But as property values increase, the certified tax rate, or the amount that the school district collects, decreases
The amount that we assess.
in the event, right, of what we assess in terms of keeping it at that level. And at the moment, and we've talked about as a board, as administration right now, employment rates are high, and it's really, as you think about it, perhaps not the time to go through truth and taxation, therefore not recommended by the board. So you always reserve the right, though, to have that discussion. Tax valuations and tax rate histories. As you can see, the different tax rates over the years that you do go through truth and taxation, and take a look at theirs as to what that tax rate has done over the years as property values have been going up. And again, Zane will get into the new growth aspect of it and what BDO's impact is on that. went through as quickly, but as hopefully as comprehensively as may need. Zane's going to elaborate on a few other things, but of course, because we have gone through so quickly, if you ever wanted to talk one-on-one regarding this next year's budget, especially as we get more information, I'm happy to schedule that time with Zane.
Yeah.
Or me.
They are willing to meet with any of us up to as many as 3 at a time if any board member would like to sit down and have some of the details and fine print looked up.
So if you want to stop,
I will
I
stop
will
for them.
start. Okay. So you've seen this is what it looks like for the fiscal 21 budget. And of note, you'll see a jump in the expenditures for capital outlay, about $10 million more, primarily due to construction. And I bumped up the self-insurance revenue piece, kind of in keeping with what projections will be, to see where we land. But that's the one-page summary. You can see the tax rate is at 8.017. There's a little bit of a description of what's going on with each of these funds. And this is the document that we put out on the website if people want to see the budget. And then you can see the summary. We already went through this. I won't spend a lot of time. But you can see the right-hand column is the change from the fiscal 20 final legal budget and what the original is set for each of the funds. Do you have any questions about this, or we'll get into some other more interesting stuff?
Zane?
Yes.
May I just say, maybe helps frame the context here as well, in terms of pieces, moving pieces. Special session today, House Bill 5003, first substitute passed, which allows districts to use their capital levy for maintenance and operations for the next 2 fiscal years. So if you go back to the recession, I think it was probably the last time that was allowed.
To do that.
That was allowed. We want to be very careful in doing that, because as you can think about that, you're using, potentially would be using one-time funds, meaning there's a sunset to that time that you can use it for ongoing purchases. So if we were to take and use, some of that capital levy for an ongoing purpose in 2 years, we wouldn't be able to do that, and we would have to pick up the cost in some other way, right? But it does allow us some flexibility.
Is that when we were allowed to use up to 10%?
That's what it used to be.
Well, that was
Is that
actually an
different?
ongoing piece
Okay.
of the finance formulas back in the day. But during the 2010 recession, when we got hit, they basically said, you could take some of that, you could take that money and actually transfer it into your Fund 10 and use it for salaries and things like that. Ogden was doing things a little bit differently than I was, say, up in Logan. I actually never transferred the money literally from Fund 32 to Fund 10, that 10% you're talking about. Some districts did it all the time.
Yes.
I felt like they were padding their M&O budgets.
We were doing that, and that ended soon after.
Yeah.
Some of us got on board.
When the board local levy was created, that went away.
Yes.
Because they took that 10%, the basic piece they called it, and then the transportation levy, recreation levies, and they combined all of that into the board local levy. That's been about 10 years ago now. But anyway.
That's what the 10% went.
But, so what the
Yes.
superintendent is saying is basically we could take money from our construction budget and move it into Fund 10 if we wanted to. Before we do that, we're gonna have a real good conversation about that.
Yeah. And there's a process outlined in the bill that we would have to create some public awareness regarding it and meet some requirements in doing it. But and Zane, I know I'm not wordsmith, you say if we wanted to do it, I would say it's probably if we needed,
Yeah.
right, to go down that road. But it does provide a degree of flexibility for the MNO.
Yes. Okay, so that's the budget. I wanted to share with you some other things.
Now, there was some no-dos you want me to pass out, is this the time?
No, this is the exciting stuff.
Oh, okay, so I'm holding, okay,
Okay.
till later.
So this sheet is that property tax worksheet. You've seen it before, but this is where we calculate. There's a lot of information on here. You can see what the proposed tax rate valuation is, what it was last year. You can see that's where that 20.9% increase comes from that the superintendent referred to in the PowerPoint that he did. The tax rate proposed for next year is 8017, that's the dark green. The light green shows that's the certified rate. You can see over in the right-hand columns, that's how much money is gonna be generated from these property tax levies. And then down at the bottom, you can see what the effect is to the property taxpayer, assuming their value is the same this year as it was last. So if they have a home and the market value is $250,000, which is the average this year, it's gone up from last year.
Wasn't it 196 or something?
Last year it was 224, the year before it was about 196. It was like 127 when I first came. We'll leave it at that.
That's the notice.
Okay, so anyway, you can see that, if the home is valued the same, they could expect a reduction in their property tax bill from the school district. Or will their value stay the same? Not likely. Probably gonna go up. But the big change in the property tax levy this year has to do with what's going on in the debt service fund. Okay, and part of our plan, and we've talked a little bit about this, we talked about it quite in depth with the Budget and Finance Committee, but it makes sense for us in the long term to keep our debt service levy level from year to year to year. And all the modeling that we've done, we've anticipated picking up that new growth and applying that to our debt service payments will save us a lot of money, millions of dollars over time, as we're able to pay that stuff off faster.
Which in reality, when us as Ogden.
Ogden's, the citizens of Ogden.
Citizens of Ogden.
Yes. So that's where that detail comes from. Now, I thought it would be interesting for you to see how that breaks down and what BDO, what was the impact of BDO. So this shows us. In the left-hand column is the revenue that's proposed to be generated with the FY21 tax rates that we talked about. You can see that compared to last year, that's about $6 million more money collected to the school district. How much of that has to do with BDO is almost $4 million. So that little section in the kind of yellowish brown shows you in the basic levy, we're going to collect about $805,000. Now, that doesn't really help us budget-wise, because the basic levy is what gets equalized through the minimum school program. So anything extra I collect in the basic levy, the state will reduce the amount that they send me. In other words, if I'm entitled to $50 million and I collect 805 more out of that locally, the state sends me that much less. So between what we collect locally and what the state generates for us, I get what we're entitled to have. So we don't get a windfall from any increase to the basic rate. The voted local levy, though, that is money that does come to the district. It's unrestricted. We can use that how we need to. Board local levy is the same. Our capital levy is earmarked to construction, so that's another $780,000 that we'll have towards construction. And then we've got a lot of that going to pay our debts on the money that we borrow. So, and some of it ends up in the charter school local levy, but if you look at that, that's almost $4 million of revenue that we are getting because of the BDO RDA that's coming off the books. If you add up what is in the voted and the board levy, that's $1.3 million and change. And then the right-hand column is the difference between the 5.9 million and the BDO piece. So that other $2 million comes back into our budget. Again, about 800,000 of that is for the basic levy. And so we won't get that money. The 116, the 313 is money that we'll have in our M&O fund, the 133 in our capital outlay fund, and the 863 goes into the debt service fund. So, and why is that important? Well, we made some decisions last year, betting on the RDA money coming off the books. And so how does that all play out? And that's what this spreadsheet is intended to show. So you can see last year we did our settlement with everybody. We did a 4.2% COLA to the salary schedule for the teachers. Anyway, we projected our costs last year increase would be $2.3 million. The money we got last year was just under $1 million. So we knew that we were going to take a hit to our fund balance of $1.3 million. Okay, and if you take the revenue we get from BDO, that about covers it, which is what we hoped it would do. So that because of the BDO money that we've got, we can pay for the pay raise we did last year in years going forward. We'll take a hit to the fund balance this year, but we knew we would, and that was part of the plan. And so I feel good about that. Don't usually like spending money I don't have in hand, so.
And BDO continues to grow.
So, and that will continue to grow, and it will show up as new growth from year to year to year. If there are new businesses that come online or something like that. If the businesses that are there just increase in value, then that increases our taxable value, but that kind of growth drives down the certified tax rate. New growth is independent of the certified tax rate, so it turns out that that's money that we get. So we've had a lot of growth in the last 5 years, huge growth. It's about doubled, and that's been a great thing in a lot of ways.
Zane, I would just say in that regard, we were in a tough spot last year, and we did what we needed to do, right, to be able to compensate teachers and remain competitive in that space. But I think, and I'd imagine the board agrees, it's more of the exception to how we like to do our budgets. But it did work, and we anticipated that it would. But it was a calculated risk, I'll put it that way, that kept us keeping our good teachers and being able to compensate them in ways that other places were more appealing at that time. So we were able to remain competitive, and it worked to our favor. And gratefully, the BDO effort also played out the way we needed it to.
So I wanted to share with you some things to be thinking about. For all intents and purposes, the budget presentation has been given, and at some point we will need a motion to approve the original budget for fiscal '21, and to set the tentative tax rate. And I would call it the tentative, I always say the tentative tax rate because every once in a while something happens between now and when they actually issue things. So I would say if you could just approve approve the tax rate at the certified tax rate. And if that adjusts up or if that adjusts down, I have authority at that point to go with the certified tax rate. Now Donna wanted to show the budget scenarios. I can do that after you make a motion on the
Let's do that, let's get the
budget.
business out of the way,
Okay.
so you're not getting confused. So then I'm looking for a motion to approve the proposed budget,
The original budget.
the original budget.
Just call it the original FY '20
Motion
budget.
to approve the original budget for the fiscal year 2021, including the certified tax rate. That's President I'll do. Okay, that's,
So moved.
thank you. For a second.
I'll second.
Motion by Board Member Nancy and Board Member
I
Susan.
guess technically we didn't open it up for a comment. We should, but.
We did real fast. But for comment, thank you. So a motion's been made, a second noted, and in the discussion, we opened it up and nobody's here to help us, so. It's that, and we did it legally, and I think we're okay. Is that right, Paula? Thank you. With that being said, all those in favor, please, approving this motion regarding our certified tax rate and budget for next year, please say aye.
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 Thank you. Carries. Now let's go into the fun stuff, because
Okay.
that really concludes the significance of this meeting.
Yeah, this is information item for you guys to be thinking about. And that's kind of how I presented it to the budget committee the other day, but we have some decisions to make. We do know that we're gonna be issuing another $30 million in bonds this fall. We'll probably time that so that we do it around the 1st of October, get ahead of the November election, and any fallout that might come from that. So
then, you know, how, of the amount that was approved, voter approved, how much have we issued and what do we have left?
Okay, so the voters authorized 87 million, and we issued 30 million last year, last fall. And we got in that process, you recall, about 3 million in premium. That's money we still have to pay back, but we were able to, you know, we basically said we want to sell 30 million in bonds, and they gave us $33 million to do it. And we expect that we're gonna have that happen again, but one of the things that we've done historically is issued all of our debt over a 20-year period, so we've issued 20-year bonds. I think we're in a position to make a decision about doing 15-year bonds, which if we're able to do 15-year bonds, we'll be able to pay the debt off 5 years sooner, obviously, and thereby save lots of money, millions, even in interest expense to the taxpayers of Ogden. And in our case, we know we've got a lot of older buildings. We're gonna be in perpetual bond when we can, build when we can mode. I don't see that ever ending. And so,
Even when we do build, have all of our buildings done, some of the ones that were done a long time ago.
it'll be about time to start thinking about what are we gonna do.
Yeah.
Major renovations. I don't think we're gonna be in a situation where you have to worry about seismic safety like we do right now with some of our old buildings. And so maybe we'll be able to do some renovating that will take care of things without having to rebuild the whole structure. But that said, I asked Louis Young to run some scenarios for us to be thinking about. We'll have to make a decision here in a couple of months of what we're gonna do. But here's what a 15-year scenario looks like. So if you look, this is a snapshot of our outstanding debt as it stands.
So,
And, oh, sorry, better
We don't have this.
share this tab instead.
It's just gonna show.
There you go.
there we go, yeah.
Thanks. Sorry about that. So here's a snapshot of what our debt looks like graphically and what we're paying. You can see we've got some debt that's gonna go away at the end of fiscal '23. The gold is the refinance debt that we did in 2016. And the turquoise looking color right above that is the debt that we issued last fall, that $30 million. And that 30 million, you can see, we're not paying very much on principal on that, but it'll pay off in 2039. Under a 15-year scenario, the orange would be about what the debt looks like that we would issue this fall. And you can see it would pay off 4 years before the bonds that we paid off last year. And then the next year, we plan to issue the other 27. And that's what that top layer of blue looks like layered in this. The slanted line that you see going up represents the dollars that we would collect by keeping our tax rate the same and assuming a 2.5%, which is a very conservative number of growth in our tax valuation, given that it's been 10% for the last 5 years and 20 this coming year. So by doing that, we're able to be very aggressive about getting our debt paid off. And the next window of opportunity, if we wanted to have another bond election, or you could issue lease revenue bonds and let that play into this too. It's got its own graph scenario, which I'm not showing you here. But there's a window of opportunity in 2027 for about $2 million in bond payments without having to increase the tax rate to anybody, okay? And then you can see how that would layer in over a 15-year period. It just lays on the top there. So that's what a 15-year scenario looks like. If we were gonna go to a 20-year scenario, which has been what we've typically done, you can see, let's see, let me do this again. There we go. So you'll see that the window under a 20-year scenario is wider in 2027. But the payoff is out to 2041. So we need to kind of think about what we want to do going forward. I personally think, and my recommendation would be that we look at that 15-year scenario really, really hard. Even though we don't have as big of a window in 2027, we'll just have a lot more flexibility going forward.
In the long run, better for the citizens of London.
In the long run.
I think put our district in a better situation.
And we can talk about the pros and cons. There are some cons and there's a certain amount of risk in going 15 as opposed to 20. For instance, we actually went into a depression and our valuations really took a tank. It could be problematic. I don't think the odds of that are great at all.
But even if that did, it's refinancing as well.
We have those options. So anyway, I just wanted you to see this, to be thinking about it. And that's what I had to share with you tonight on the budget. So.
Comments from anybody? So when you say in a couple of months, if we're not meeting in July, is there a tentative time? Would you keep us
So I
posted?
think probably in August, we'll be passing some bond resolutions, notifying the public of our intent to issue some bonds. So I'm working with Lewis Young, they'll give us a timeline, which I'll share with board leadership, at least the budget committee when you meet, so you can see when we need to do certain things in order to get the bonds issued by the 1st of October.
Would there be any advantage, or what would be the advantages of issuing all bonds instead of
The
just
whole
30?
57.
The whole amount?
We can talk about that too. You know, we do have to make sure we spend the money within a couple of years, or we have to look at
all of our
arbitrage things, but all the projects are supposed to be finished within a couple of years, so I'm not really worried about that. I was mainly worried about layering in the debt.
Yeah.
And not overextending ourselves. While I wanna keep the tax rate at 0.0018, I don't really wanna have to go above that. If we can get out of it, that's increasing the levy. Our certified rate with regards to the debt service levy is whatever we set it based on our bond payment schedule. So we could look, and I think we should look at the scenario, what if we just issue 57 million now, as opposed to 30 now and 27 next year? We can look at that.
Okay. Any other comments, anybody? Is that it? Are we done?
I have a question. You said there may be a possibility of a special meeting in July. Depending on what happens with the state budget and negotiations that you asked about, could we resolve negotiations in July also?
Yeah, as soon as we,
Yeah, we'll be,
as soon
I'm
as they
sure we'll
progress,
be convening some IBB discussions as soon as we
know.
find out what we're gonna get. And I don't,
Yeah.
even though the legislature's gonna tell us what they're gonna do tomorrow, hopefully, we won't really know how that's gonna impact us until the state crunches the numbers and gives some preliminaries.
That's my hesitation, because depending on that
Yeah.
turnaround and convening IBB, there's a couple variables there that might take some time, but we'll see.
Okay.
Question popped in my mind. You mentioned earlier, is part of the governor's executive order, is that part of tomorrow's? So what would be entailed with that? What power is behind that? That's for us starting school in August?
Yes.
So is that the new trump card?
I think it's in connection with the State Board of Education.
That was for your benefit.
That's for the Trump cards for Zane's.
You're still conservative and everything else, like, man, I gotta, there's some conversion going on tonight.
So the State Board of Education putting together a proposal in coordination with the Governor's Office, State Department of Health, in terms of what those statewide expectations would be for reopening schools and the parameters in which we should operate, given some, what will appear to be, or intended to be, some guardrails, right, to help. Now, we'll be beholden to those. It doesn't mean that we can't take added or other measures, but we at least have to meet some minimum requirements, and that's where the executive order would come into place, is some assurance
That if we do everything, that we might go.
that we could open up appropriately. Now, there's, and I realize board meeting's coming in advance, so I don't mean to open up new things, but in terms of what we're planning for this fall, really 3 things have risen. In terms of priority, well, that is one, right? What does it look like reopening in a safe and a healthy way in coordination with the State Board of Education and the Governor's Office? 2 is the budget issues, and we're seeing those play out right now. 3 are, given current the conditions within the community and nationally, are welcoming students back and potential issues of race, protests, even on our campuses, and how do we create a safe space for that to occur without disrupting the educational purposes that we have. But to be sensitive to it. What we're seeing right now in communities across the nation, we're not immune to, and when our students reconvene, some of that may come across the threshold into our schools, and being prepared as to how to address those types of things. We have board policy, and we're revisiting board policy. Jessica did a great job of pulling together some of that information for board policy to be proactive as to what that might look like this fall as well.
Part of the question for that as well, we're having our meeting tonight, I received an alert that a poll that's now 50 minutes old. When it came, it was brand new, but from Deseret News saying that nearly half of graduating high school seniors say the COVID-19 pandemic has altered their college plans. And so it is having an impact on education, that I would hope that if we do everything we're supposed to be doing to make sure we're safe, as you explained earlier, that we don't have another situation like we experienced this year. So that was part of it. And also, and I'll say that I received a phone call from our rep for USBA, a regional rep, Kelly Priest from Morgan School District. He called me to pass on to our board members that Terry Shoemaker felt that it would be good for us to be very much aware of what's going on as far as the state education funding, and let them know what our feelings are. And there's always that fine line with putting too much, screws. I'm not suggesting that, but just to be very much aware and let our representatives know that we are in favor of that. As well as making sure that schools are, that we follow through. If we follow through with the state plans, then we'll be able to stay open. And I think we're ahead of the game on that from what Superintendent talked about tonight, so grateful for that. So I wanted to let Kelly know that I would pass it on to you as board members, that there are a couple items, and I think they have another meeting tomorrow as well as the state, so there's a lot of meetings taking place with regards to education. It almost sounds like we're gonna need to have some kind of a meeting in July for a couple of things, whether it's negotiation, budget, so board leadership will keep you all abreast of those kind of things, so. Any other comments from anyone else? Joyce, do you have anything you wanna bring up?
Tomorrow's June 19th, Juneteenth, thank you. Juneteenth, June 19th marks the commemoration of the ending of slavery. And to that end, I've made a statement in the district bulletin that we strongly condemn all acts of racism, sexism, ageism, classism, etc., and any form of discrimination by any individual or group. But we also support peaceful protests, but strongly condemn violent exhibitions. To that end, also, given Juneteenth being tomorrow, myself and other educational leaders in northern Utah have prepared a statement to that end. 3 other superintendents, the 2 presidents at the tech colleges, and President Mortensen of Weber State will be releasing, just to give you a heads up, a statement to that end. So
great.
We'll pass that along as well.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Good. All right. Motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Thank you. Appreciate y'all.